Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriella Arruda, host of the Style POV Podcast, and I'm here to help you learn to trust your fashion instincts, hone your authentic style POV, and find strength through style. Today, we're diving into a very special guest segment I like to call the Style Files. This is where you, the listeners, take center stage and share your personal style journeys, the highs, the lows, the hurdles, and the triumphs. It's a space where we can all come together and learn from each other's experiences, find inspiration, and celebrate the diversity of style perspectives that make each of us unique. I'm thrilled to welcome Gizelle to the podcast today. Gizelle has been on a fascinating journey of self-discovery through fashion, and I know her story will resonate with so many of you. Gizelle's experience is a testament to the power of persistence and the beauty of evolving style. So welcome, Gizelle. Thank you so much for doing this. I am so excited to hear all about your style journey, and I think everyone will really resonate with your progress and your wins. So what originally started your style journey?
So I've never been into fashion, at least as a child. I would just wear whatever my mom would have me wear. And then as a teenager, I slowly started exploring different things. But I noticed that I never truly liked what I would wear. So eventually, into college, I transitioned into just wearing leggings, a t-shirt, and then a jacket. Now, those are fine if that's what you would want to wear, but I just wore them because I did not know what else to wear.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe my sophomore year of college, I was introduced to Kibbe. I believe it was on Facebook. And I didn't dive too deeply into it, to be honest. At that point, I believed I was a soft natural or maybe just pure natural. And then I just dropped it off because it felt a little too complex, too convoluted. I had no idea what was happening. I just let it settle. And then I believe about a year and a half ago, I re-encountered Kibbe. And this time I was like, you know what? I truly do want to change how I present myself. I want to appear more confident, feel more comfortable as well. And that came when I started my first job around that time.
You know what Gizelle shared here is something I think many of us can relate to. The feeling of diving into something new and being completely overwhelmed by it, the complexity and the nuances. It's interesting how sometimes we're just not ready to absorb certain information, and it takes a bit of life experience or change in circumstances to circle back to the original system and really see the value in it. Her story is a great reminder that it's okay to take a step back and return to things when it feels more in line with our style needs, and we feel we have the space and confidence to assess the new information.
So I said, okay, I want to make a change. I want to appear more confident. So I decided to dive more deeply into Kibbe. I joined a couple Facebook groups. I also spent some time on Reddit, and I slowly started getting into some style YouTubers, including yourselves and Ellie Jean Royden. So that's how I started my journey. Slowly, I got introduced into color analysis as well. And then after that came essences. And then I tried to fuse different systems here and there. And I believe that now I'm finally at a stage where I feel at home, right? I feel comfortable with the parameters that I've defined for my personal style.
That's, first of all, congratulations. That is so amazing. And it's a slower process than I think we anticipate when we first start this journey. So when you first found Kibbe, or let's say the second time you found Kibbe, because the first time it was probably just a rabbit hole where you're like, what are these concepts? What are you telling me? Why is this person femme fatale and this one is fresh and sensual and all that? So when you found Kibbe for the second time, what started to click for you? What drew you in? What made it feel like, okay, this is something I want to explore? I know you're in this transitional phase of your life. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So the second time I found Kibbe, I paid a little bit more attention to some of the restrictions that he placed. So for example, the height limit, right? At that point, because I am just under 5'7", I believe like a centimeter under or something, I realized, okay, I probably have automatic verticals, so that really narrows my choices. So it felt less overwhelming, right? So then I was just looking at dramatic, soft dramatic. And at that point, I said, okay, I already only have 3 to choose from. So let me go through each one of them and see what clicks and what doesn't. The first thing I was able to rule out was flamboyant natural because I don't believe I have wet, right? And I think that what really made it click for me was that whenever I buy tops, I have to go a size up because of my bust, but never because of my shoulders, right?
Yeah.
And even then, if it fits my bust properly, then the shoulder seam kind of hangs off. So I was like, probably don't have width then. So then my two choices, dramatic and soft dramatic, I'm still not fully sure, to be honest, but I'm leaning more towards soft dramatic because I do believe that my bust interrupts the vertical line. So that's why I'm doing trial and error now. Yeah.
Did learning about the Kibbe system and how it approaches style lines and stuff change how you viewed clothes and like how you approached, how you looked at a piece of clothing? Because, you know, you started off with saying you had this uniform and you did it because that was the uniform.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So at first I just wore whatever I felt that fit, you know, in terms of it's not too big, it's not too small. So that's the only thing I would ever notice about clothes. But with that, what would be introduced to Kibbe, I realized, okay, so I need to be paying attention to what I need to accommodate for, what my body truly needs to feel more comfortable. And that's when I realized, okay, I do have to accommodate my bust. So that is one thing that changed my mindset. The other thing is I also got into sewing shortly after being introduced to Kibbe. And I started paying even more attention to things like straightness, long lines, or elongation, and even more so bust accommodation too. So it definitely has changed the way I see clothes now, especially with things like draping as well, right? It's not something I would ever have thought before. Yeah.
I think Kibbe and sewing go so well together because those principles play off each other. Like all of a sudden you look at a pattern differently and you're like, oh, okay, this is what he means by that term. Or this is how I make it shape around a curve accommodation. Did you start sewing your own clothes? May I ask? I love sewers.
Yes.
That's why I ask.
Yes, I did. So far, I've only made skirts and a blouse that I haven't finished. So the reason I didn't finish the blouse was because I realized it might not be the right color for me. It was a very bright neon.
It's a journey, right? You're stacking the information. Did it change how you use fabric in your style at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now that I know more about dramatic versus soft dramatic, I tend to choose slightly softer fabrics so that I can drape more easily, right? But when I do still want to lean into the dramatic side, then I use stiffer fabrics so that I can get those sharp angles.
So you got Kibbe under your belt. You're starting to sew a little bit. Everything is starting to make a little bit more sense for you personally. What came next?
Then was color analysis. And that one, I had not resolved that until about a month ago. So that's a journey too. I started off believing I was a dark autumn. And that was off of a YouTube video specifically for Black women. But I now realize that I incorrectly assessed my own temperature, right?
It can be really hard to do, especially with those neutral seasons. Once you drape in person, you're like, wow, there these subtleties. I wasn't even aware of them yet until you start to see it on yourself.
Yeah, so I've been on that journey for about a year and a half too, I'd say. And so I just started trying some dark autumn clothes and colors. And I didn't love the way they looked. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't feel right. So I transitioned into dark winters, and that felt more appropriate. But then in some of the Facebook groups I was in, people mentioned that my complexion seemed a little bit soft. So maybe try soft summer, maybe true summer. So then I started trying those colors, and then I got even more confused. So I said, okay, I'm going to find a professional who knows what they're doing and go off from there. So that was the next step in my style journey.
Gizelle's color analysis journey really highlights how tricky it can be to navigate the process on your own. Identifying your season isn't always straightforward, especially with so many subtle nuances in your coloring. It's hard to pinpoint without the right guidance. It's easy to see how someone could get confused when trying to analyze themselves. Lighting, camera quality, and even our own biases can all play a huge role to throw us off track. And as Gizelle mentioned, relying on group analysis from online communities or social media can often lead to more confusion. While those groups can be helpful for sharing experiences, they aren't always reliable when it comes to accurately assessing your season. There's a reason professional analysts spend months and years training and practicing. It's a skill that requires a trained eye and and the right tools. So if you're struggling with color analysis on your own, it might be worth considering a professional consultation to get the clarity you need, because you'll be basing a multitude of future purchases on this information. And it's wonderful when you do an in-person analysis to see the information with your own eyes.
So when you were trying all these things, it's hard because, you ask the groups and they can be very convincing, and you start to be like, maybe I am muted. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. I had that too. Everyone's like, you're muted. And you're like, I must be muted. How were the muted colors working for you? So we know autumn was feeling a little off. How were you feeling about the summers? Were they feeling like a step forward, a step back from autumn?
That's definitely better than autumn. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but I still didn't love it completely, right? I felt that it was an improvement. And I will mention that people also do tend to compliment me when I wear a certain color. It's this very soft lavender. So I thought, okay, this is even more confirmation, and maybe soft summer is a good season for me. So I started going between dark winter and soft summer. And I know they don't have as many similarities, but the way I see it.
But they do.
Yeah, kind of.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot. Yeah. The parameters aren't as far as people think. People think like, how could you confuse a winter with a summer? But in reality, those palettes, obviously they have different parameters, but they do overlap in areas. And the nuances can be hard to differentiate when you're not quite picking up all the clues in the face. Sometimes we focus on one thing. Oh, does it clear my skin? And you're like, yeah, it's awesome. But then it's making you look frozen. And I'm sure in your in-person, they use that term sometimes. Yes. So how is your wardrobe looking during this? Like, how are you shopping? Are you going out and just buying everything? What was your exploration into these seasons like?
Yes. So once I was very convinced that I was a dark autumn, I said, okay, I will start buying clothes in this palette. And when I realized they were not working out, I said, okay, I don't want to do this again. So I went on a shopping freeze that lasted about a year or so. A very long time.
That's smart, though. Smart.
Yeah, because I realized that I truly didn't understand it very well. I didn't feel confident in just starting buying dark winter and then soft summer. I said, okay, no more clothes for a while. When I finally decided to get an in-person analysis, I said, okay, once I have my results confirmed, then I can start shopping clothes again. But then I still wanted to get some more parameters narrowed down before that.
Yeah. You realize that you have to go slowly with the purchases, because once you get the new information, then you look back and you're like, ooh, not quite sure I should have bought that piece.
Yeah. Exactly.
So here you moved away from dark autumn. You're waffling between the dark winters and the soft summers. You're on a shopping freeze. How are you building outfits, or what are you feeling about the outfits that you have built?
Before I got into color analysis, my wardrobe was almost exclusively black because
everyone.
Yeah. Because we all hear black suits everyone, and I felt that it was a safe choice, so almost exclusively black. And whenever I would post outfits in different groups for Kibbe and essences, people would almost inform me to put more color into my outfits, right?
Yeah.
But I did say, once I figure out my color analysis, then I'll move on to that stuff.
So were you feeling like those outfits were starting to hit certain points that you were liking, or was it still very messy? Because I feel like it can be hard to take on a lot and be like, is it the color? Is it the line?
Yeah, I think that parameter that I was able to narrow down was the lines. I believe that. I will admit, for me, it was easy because it's just pretty much long, straight with a little bit of curve accommodation. So that was pretty easy for me to narrow down in the beginning. And so the only thing that seemed off was the color, only because it was exclusively black, right?
Yeah.
So there's almost no variety. If everything is long, straight, with a little bit of curve accommodation in black, it looks the same. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we are. What inspired you to go in person, and how did you choose a system that resonated with you?
So I was in a color analysis group where there are a lot of people of color, and we were talking about the different systems and what we feel most comfortable with. And SciArt was one of them, right? Because I did come to learn that the focus is on the skin and not on the features individually, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're only to go off of the features, then most people of color will be assigned to pretty much two major groups, right?
Yeah. Incorrect. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was recommended to try SciArt, and I tried to find some analysts in my area. None of them were using SciArt. It was just traditional color analysis. And then one day, randomly, someone shared an Instagram story from this color analyst that was SciArt certified. And he happened to be just a couple hours away from me. So I said, this is the one. This is the one I will be going to.
It was a sign, right?
Yeah, exactly. It came at the perfect time too, because I was really shopping for color analysis at that point. Finally had the color analysis sessions, and I still have the notes we took. Let's see. At first, we tried to compare spring versus summer. Spring was too loud, made my skin kind of yellow. I looked very tired. It just, it was too much for me, right?
Too bouncy underneath your skin, maybe?
Yeah. I almost
just not believable.
Yeah. It was not the one for me. I will mention too that when I was posting in these groups, I did my own draping, try to get the color, but it was still difficult with the cameras. And people have suggested pretty much every season for me at that point. And this will be a theme going forward. Summer was preferred. I looked more rested. My cheekbones look a little bit higher. It almost accentuated my features.
Yeah.
Then it was winter versus autumn. Autumn, I looked very tired again. I had this yellowing on my face. And I will admit that I did notice that when I was trying dark autumn colors, which is why I said, I'm going to take a step back from this.
Yeah, kind of look like a peasant, not regal and beautiful. Just
oh goodness, that's actually really funny because this is something we wrote down for autumn. I look like a peasant. That's really funny.
Yeah, it's like when you put someone in autumn colors that is not an autumn, especially those like test browns, you can really tell pretty quickly. You're like, this is just, you do not look regal and fresh. You look, can I have some more? You know?
Oh, that's so funny. That's exactly what we talked about that day. Then we compared soft summer to light summer. We preferred soft summer. Light summer looked too childish, tacky. I didn't look very approachable. It just seemed off, right?
A mismatch,
Yeah, just not quite right. And then when we compared true summer to soft summer, we decided to come back to it because there were positives and negatives to both, right?
Yeah.
So with true summer, I looked, she said, confident, taller, but a little bit too loud in some instances. Soft summer, I looked reserved, but maybe not fully confident or self-assured. So yeah, we were debating.
Sometimes when a color is just okay, it's not distracting, but the face tends to sit a little bit in front of the color. Like the color isn't naturally supporting that. So that may be what they were trying to communicate, that it just, you could do more than those colors. Like there was a hint that this color wasn't quite enough for your features. Like it wasn't bad, but it could be, we could turn it up to even better, you know? Right. A lot of color analysis is like step forward or step back. I don't know if you had that like experience, like, are we moving forward or is maybe a step back? When she was doing the draping, how did you feel about the process? Because you did the drapes at home and you're taking these photos and you're trying to piece through, I want to have clear skin, or I want to look fresh, or I want to look like I have natural makeup, but it's hard to tell, right? Did you feel like there was a transition when you did it in person and you were being guided?
Yes, absolutely. So one, it was the guidance telling me where to look, what I'm looking for in general, which to be honest, I didn't know when doing my own draping at home. And the other thing that I believe helped was the lighting she was used. It was a very specific lighting that
full spectrum,
Yes, that's what it was.
Full spectrum lighting. Yeah, that's what SciArt uses. And it's very controlled. There's a Catherine Kellett's, the founder of SciArt, who basically created the way we modern drape today. She was the one who made it almost like a scientific experiment. I'm sure Anna's had a gray background. They had the little gray coat. You had the cape. Everything was neutralized so we could just focus on what's happening with the face, and we're going to move the drape back and forth. And that's why sometimes you have to revisit things, because all of a sudden you take a drape and you're like, I like what's happening in the eyes, but something isn't right everywhere else.
That was exactly the experience,
Yeah. So you had a lot of confidence in where you were going during the draping process.
Yes. Yeah. I had looked at some of the client pictures she had posted, and I was like, yeah, you can definitely tell these colors work for these people. So I felt very confident going to her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I'd love to hear the notes on where you ended up in the Sire system.
Yes. Then we also tested the winters. We ended up preferring dark winter. And then when we tested dark winter versus soft summer, that one was a little bit difficult to decide on. But we did agree that with dark winter, I looked more regal, queenly, and more self-assured. And also still calm, right? So it wasn't like the colors were too loud. I still looked pretty.
Yeah, harmonized.
Yeah.
There's an interesting concept too. I know a lot of the groups have talked about systems. Do you want to pop? Do you want to harmonize? I think what a lot of people get wrong, in my personal opinion, and you can share how you feel about this, is that we think when a color harmonizes with us that you notice the face first, but sometimes the face is sitting in front of the color. I don't know if she used this term, but like a floating head, where you look just disconnected and your face gets a little melty. Like you lose that sharp jawline that you get with your dark winter colors. It just doesn't quite. So people are like, it's harmonizing. You look like the color and you are one. And you're like, no, we're melting into the color. It's not supporting us. It's not standing this. It's not this pedestal that lets you shine. And I had that experience too with going between the summers, because I thought I was a summer. And the summer colors were not distracting, but actually I was just like this weird little floating head, and my jaw almost looked like it melted into those grays. But then in bright spring, everyone's, wow, this is such a crazy shock that you're a bright spring. But my facial coloring is so much more present in those colors. So when you got the dark winter, how were you feeling about it?
Yeah. So at first I was just a tad disappointed. Only because I really thought that soft summer would be it, right?
Yeah.
But then when I sat with the results for about 30 minutes or so, I thought, actually, these are such beautiful colors. And in the end, they do make me pop in a way, right? They do make me more present, more confident. So I think I'm over that hill now.
Oh, I think everyone has a little bit of shock because you're seeing it happen. You're seeing the colors go back and forth, and you're starting to see the direction, and you're like, this isn't what I expect. A lot of people have this isn't what I expected. I think in my brain, I was like, literally, oh my God, I'm not a bright spring. I cannot be a bright spring. Like in my head, I was like, please be bright winter, because bright spring, I don't know if I can handle that. And my teacher, Christine Skaman, who I think actually is linked to your analyst as well, she said, people either love bright spring or they're terrified of it. So you got to go into this slowly. And then I got 30 minutes in and I was like, okay, I can see the vision. Yeah. But I think it's very common to have that like shell shock moment of what do I do with this palette?
I know. I will say you do look very powerful in your proper colors, your bright, sunny colors. So I'm glad you're making that transition slowly.
Yeah. Did you feel like the adjectives, did you relate to those dark winter adjectives? Because I know there's like a lot of regalness attached to the winter season and some power and some reserve, a dignified quality. Queen is a really good way to put it. Did you relate to that?
Yes. In some level, yes, because the essences that I had determined at the time also correlated with dark winter, right? So after really thinking about it, I thought this works out so well for me because all of these parameters, they interconnect, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely do see it in some capacity.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes it unlocks things I can see it. Like I can see the vision. I can see where these puzzle pieces that were all out on the table are now starting to like perfectly connect. So how did you approach your wardrobe now that you got this dark winter?
Yes. So with my little fan, I started going through my wardrobe. And the tip that my analyst gave me was don't try to actually match the color, but look at it matches in general. It belongs to the palette, right?
Yeah, you don't want the color below it to be overpowering or or fading in the back. You want them to look like they're part of the same family. Do they all feel like friends? Because it's a tool. It's not a strict rule with that. These are your colors and this is it.
Yes. So that's the first thing I did. Started going through my wardrobe. And I will say I was surprised to see quite a lot of pieces that do fall in the dark winter category. There's a few things that are generally a little too warm, and they're from my dark autumn days. So that makes sense.
Dark autumn days, yeah.
Yeah.
But you sounded like you were already on a pretty good track, so it wasn't like a complete wardrobe overhaul. Was it easy to transition to outfits with those colors since they were already in your wardrobe?
Yes. So what I started doing is trying to use every piece I have that does fall into the dark winter category. And I noticed that now I do reach out for the black pieces less often, which is good. I know that I can still wear black, but I do want to introduce more color. So
I feel like color analysis is so freeing because you feel less tethered to those colors like black. Like before I got my analysis, I loved black. I was like, don't you dare tell me to give up black. And now I'm just, I can just see what it's doing to me, and it's not doing as much as those brights. So it's easier to leave behind, know?
Exactly. You become more objective about the process.
Yeah. And you just, because you've seen it with your own eyes, it makes the decision easier. Yeah. So you've got colored nailed down, your style lines are looking good. What's happening next?
So around the same time that I got introduced to color analysis, I also learned about Kitchener essences. Mm-hmm. And that's where it started, right? With specifically Kitchener essences. My first assumption before fully understanding everything, and this was after watching some of Ellie Jean's videos as well, was natural, romantic, ingenue. So I try to stay within 3 essences because I do believe that after 4 essences, it's really hard to...
It's hard to enter. Those percentages get a little bit murkier for sure because it's 10% of an essence. How am I going to scooch that in?
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and I like the idea of R or NRI, but it also didn't feel authentic. I felt almost like I was cosplaying, if you will.
Yeah.
So didn't fully love it. And at that point, I still believed that I was natural dominant, a little bit of romantic, a little bit of ingenue. And that was when I was analyzing my features individually, which I know that it's not the best approach. At least now I know that.
It's all a journey, and it's all a exploration phase. So sometimes it's hard to not hyperfixate on one element because you're like, but this is giving me romantics.
It is, yeah. It's a lot to learn. Eventually, I joined a group called Truth is Beauty. So I joined, and it was a little bit overwhelming at first because they have a very different approach to this type of thing. Still kind of the same results, I believe, but it's just the way you get there is a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
First of all, they do strictly stick with the 3 essences, right? No more than that. Whereas I know that Kitchener does tend to assign maybe 3, 4, 5, even more, right?
Yeah.
So it was that. And then there was the paper doll exercise, which was so much fun, to be honest. I used to love playing with paper dolls as a child. So it was nice to revisit that side of me.
Did that give you any insight with the paper dolls?
Absolutely. I started with the pure essences, and then with the feedback I got from people, then I moved on to 2 essence blends, and then eventually to 3 essence blends. And when I was doing the 3 essence blends, there was something that immediately clicked for me, and I was like, I think this is the one. I wasn't too happy about it at first, but I was like, wow, I really like the way this looks. And it ended up being dramatic, natural, classic, which I was not expecting at all from the beginning.
Wait, so you said you liked the way it looked, but you were unhappy about it. Can you talk about that?
Yes. At least the clothes that I saw from the Truth is Beauty blog where I did the paper dolls, they are very plain, if you will, almost.
Didn't feel like you.
Yes. No, it's not that it didn't feel like me, but I was just a little bit disappointed that there wasn't more to it. There wasn't more shine and pop and more frills or whatever.
Yeah. Did you feel connected to those aspects, that they were something you wanted in your style, or was it something that you admired and you were, wondering if it could work?
Yes. So I believe it's the latter because growing up, I always saw these frills, bows, these beautiful dresses. I thought, wow, these look amazing on other people. And when I would try them on me, it's not that they looked bad, but I didn't love them on me specifically. But still, I was clinging on to the idea that maybe they could work for me on some capacity. It was a bit sobering, seeing that. I really do like this style better on me, even though it's not what I was expecting at all.
It's hard because the trends right now, too, are a lot of them are gamine heavy, ingenue heavy. Yeah. So it can be hard to see, this new frilly dress trend. And you're like, I want to try it, but I'm knowing it's just not quite the right iteration for me. So was that part of it as well?
In some capacity, yeah. Yeah. I don't tend to follow trends too closely, but still I do, I do admire these things about all these trends, right? Yeah.
Okay. So we're at paper dolls. We have it was dramatic, romantic classic or dramatic natural classic?
Natural classic.
Okay. Dramatic, natural classic. That's what we're feeling. And you could see the vision, but it was lacking something for you, let's say.
Yeah, it was more the shock of it, like with color analysis too, because that is not what I was expecting. And it was different from what I envisioned in the very beginning, which was natural, romantic ingenue. So the first iteration, it was quite yin heavy, whereas the one that I arrived at was more young heavy.
How were the outfits turning out? Were you exploring this in real life outfits as well?
Yes, I did start exploring that, and I was happy that DNC somewhat aligned with my Kibbe ID. Soft dramatic, not so much, but with dramatic, it worked quite well, right?
Okay.
So I was happy that there was some connection between the essences and the Kibbe ID. And the more I dressed in the DNC attire, the more I felt, wow, actually, I really love the way this looks on me. And the more fond I grew with these essences.
I love how Gizelle tied everything together with her style toolbox. It's a great example of how all of these tools, whether it's color analysis, Kibbe, or essences, can work together to create a cohesive vision of your personal style. And more than that, it shows how style is not just about looking good, but about feeling seen and expressing your true self. The way she's using these insights to build her wardrobe and express her personality is really inspiring.
And it got to the point where, as I kept exploring more outfits, people started recommending other essences to me. And I would get a bit disappointed to imagine that maybe there is something else other than DNC. Right?
Yeah. You're like, oh, this is working. Why do I need to add this fourth puzzle piece into this?
Exactly.
So the outfits are working. Everything is starting to come together. What happens next?
Yes. So at this point, people start recommending ingenue and romantic to me. And even ethereal, although I didn't see that as a possibility for me. I was like, okay, with ingenue, I can maybe see it because some individual features, I do see the ingenue, right? And then one thing that I've always done since, I believe, freshman year of college was to wear these mismatched star and moon earrings, very dainty. You probably can barely see them. I was like, okay, maybe this could be a nod to ingenue, so I'll just keep doing this because I already love it. It works for me. And romantic, the more I thought about it, this could serve me because a soft dramatic is a dramatic with a romantic undercurrent. So it could serve me in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so after you interviewed Andrea, a lot of people in some of these groups, they were very interested in getting an analysis from her. And I was one of them. I was on the fence because what if what comes out is nothing like DNC, right? Then I have to start over. And I was a bit hesitant, but I ended up just doing it. And I was very surprised by the results, actually. Some confirmation that I did get from Andrea was that natural and dramatic were dominant. Fantastic. Great.
Okay.
It's great to have that confirmation. She analyzed me as 35% natural, 20% dramatic, 15% ingenue. 10% romantic, 10% classic, 5% ethereal, and 5% gamin.
You're like, I'm worried about more than 3. And now you're like, I got 5 in there. 5 or 6. Sorry.
All 7.
All 7. Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. I miscounted that. Okay. Wow. So all 7. Although, that she's like, if you got 5% of an essence, that's a shoelace. So you could probably, it's nice to know it's in somewhere, if you ever need a little surprising.
Let's see. What surprised me the most was the ethereal and gamin, because I never considered those essences for me, although they had been recommended to me. And let's see, she said that she saw the gamin in my natural curly hair. But I don't tend to wear it that often because it's very hard to manage. So I tend to do braids. But she also mentioned ethereal. I wear like the long braids, especially these. So, she mentioned that my eyes are ever so slightly hooded. So that could hint at it. And she said that I have like mischievous air when I smile. So that's where she attributed to those. Everything else I had to debated at. But I was also surprised that I only got 10% class. As I always assumed that classic was my third essence, even though natural and dramatic, I didn't know they were in it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think also sometimes when you add blends, they can give it a impression, So when you add something like strong, bold, natural with some relaxed, soft elements, you may get something a little more balanced that could kind of mimic the idea of classic without being more traditional. Blends are always interesting because I think we just don't really know what all the blends like. We get like fixated on this is the one example of a blend. And really, we're all just so unique, beautiful creatures that like we express so many different facets, which is why I really do love the essence system, because it taps into all these little things about yourself and kind of here's how you show up in the world, and people can see that mischievous smile or they can see that regal. You got the results. A little. How are you going to approach integrating this? Because it's not so far from your blend, but there's new elements that you got.
The things that surprised, for romantic, she mentioned that my body is romantic. I am just under 5'7", and that has a dramatic flair to it. So that kind of confirms soft dramatic for me, Then I do think I will include a little romantic, in the draping piece. But that would probably, I do notice that if I wear very, glamorous jewelry, I do start to look kind of lost in it.
Yeah.
So maybe not so close to the face, especially because it's also 10%. It's such a low percentage. I will just kind of rely on my Kibbe ID to get that romantic into the...
I like to look at the 4 pillars for this because it's interesting to see where you might integrate a small amount of an essence. And it sounds like your romantic is also maybe linked to your fabric textures as well, because you said you liked those soft fabrics, those drapes, those ones that accommodate curve. How are you going about integrating all this new information? Because you got all this pretty recently, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was earlier this month in August. So I'm still looking at how I want to integrate this into my personal style. I do believe I will continue wearing my dainty earrings as a nod to ingenue. And also with my makeup, I tend to emphasize my Cupid's bow. But in general, my clothes, I think I will still rely on dramatic, natural, classic.
Did you feel like there was a connection to your dark winter analysis too? Because, some of the adjectives they use, how did you feel like that connected with the essences?
Yes. So I think that it describes dramatic, natural, classic almost to a T, right? So things like powerful, confident, polished, let's see what else, minimalistic. So those also apply to dramatic, natural, classic. So I'm very happy to stay in category with dark winter too.
Yeah. And it's like the results gave you some future possibilities, but it also confirmed. So what's next with your style journey? How is it going to progress?
Let's see. This started maybe about 7-8 months ago. I also became very interested in Ellie Jean's style roots, right? Because when I've been trying to decide what I want my personal style to look like, I wanted my formula to be body, face, coloring, and personality, right?
Yeah.
So I want all of that to be included so I can feel like it fully represents me externally and internally. So I think that the style roots is a very good way to address the personality side of it too. Even though with color analysis and essences, there are adjectives that do relate to personality. And I am very lucky that they do coincide with it.
Yeah.
But if they didn't, it would be another very good way to implement that into my personal style. So I've taken her quiz a few times. I've done some of her exercises too to try to arrive at my style roots. And I believe that right now I'm very comfortable with moon, stone, and mountain, which do coincide very well with dramatic, natural, classic too.
So the roots were that extra piece, that finishing piece, that customization. Yes. It gave you a framework to say, I have so much good data here. Here's how I take it. This is me when I look into the mirror.
Exactly. Yeah. Final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So how are you feeling about the outfits you're building now? Is it easy to get dressed in the morning?
So I'm still very much in a messy mood. But I will say it is absolutely much easier than it was 1 year ago, 2 years ago. So now I have a certain almost uniform again that I go to. But it is it's a little bit more colorful. Still working on that. But I feel like it complements my body and my face more. And to some extent, it even represents my personality more as well. So I just feel more confident getting dressed and going out in the morning.
That's amazing. There's the messy middle, but then there's also this wonderful part of being like, I know the baseline. I know what works for me. I know these things make me shine. Now it's just about figuring out how do they show up in those everyday outfits? How are they presenting themselves? And the fact that you're getting easier outfits each time is such an amazing sign because it means like it's starting to become like an instinct and less of the individual tools. It's just flowing out of you effortlessly. How has shopping been since you've gotten this information?
Oh, the first thing that I do try to do is shop by color, of course. So I do take the scan with me. And if it's online, I do have some online resources where I can try to compare.
Yeah.
And that's the first step always. So if it's not in my palette, I say at this time, I will not be buying it unless for whatever reason it matched every other of my parameters, right?
Yeah.
So that is my first way to exclude everything that might not work for me. Now, I'll still buy things that are not in my palette eventually. It's a tool. It's not a rule.
Yes, of course.
But for now, I do want to try to give myself some structure before I start exploring, right? Because I'm still learning realistically.
So. I mean, it's all an evolution. You reach one phase and then you enjoy it for a while, but inevitably you're going to get new information a year from now. Yep. It may not be another tool, but it may be a new lifestyle parameter. You're like, all of a sudden I have to dress for this. Now I got to transition. Yeah. I got to go to a new messy middle because I have to look like this for my job or I have these events to go to. Do you feel it was seamless to integrate these into all aspects of your lifestyle, or were there certain outfits, or are there certain outfits that you still struggle with?
My outfits are not necessarily comfortable. I live in a very hot climate too, and very humid. So the dramatic, natural, classic, at least the ideal outfits that I would like to wear more often, they're not very feasible every time. So I tend to love trench coats or just any jackets that are longer, but of course, not the most comfortable thing. For shoes, I have resorted to wearing some pointed toe boots. So those are pretty comfortable. So that's one thing. But yeah, I feel like dramatic, natural, classic tends to look very good with layers.
Yeah.
And that's just not feasible all the time. But it is generally cold in the office, so I do that, not necessarily on the weekends.
It sounds like a lot of us are sacrificing the weather needs for our outfits currently, especially when you get that first thing. You're like, how do I get the dynamic essence of all this blend when I have to combat 90-degree heat? It's like, what would a queen wear in 90-degree heat? That can be a difficult question to answer. You don't get your regalness with a tank top and shorts necessarily.
Yeah.
Is that your next thing you would like to tackle, of getting the comfort and weather more integrated?
Yes. Yeah. So one thing that I could try to do is go for more natural fibers like cotton, linen, to honor that natural aspect of my blend, even though it would make it a little bit harder with the romantic part.
Yeah.
So that is one thing I can do, make things more breathable, a little bit more comfortable. But but comfort is definitely going to a major thing going forward too.
Yeah. It's like you got to figure out what fabric, just like with seasonal color analysis, it's kind of about finding those boundaries of your colors. It's not like these are the only 5 colors you can wear. It's how far can you push it this way? How far can you push it this way? Kind of like with when you're building an outfit too, because you're like, what fabric, allows me to breathe, but doesn't tip over into being too straight of a cut for my body. Are you considering sewing any more of your own clothes?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of some pant idea. It's something that I saw somewhere on Pinterest, I believe. But they have this draped quality to them. So they're pretty straight, but then there's like this draping that comes across. So that's my next project. After that, I want to try to tackle a trench coat. We'll see how that goes.
That's going to be interesting. Any ideas on how you're going to tackle the fabrics? So does your climate have seasons, or is it always hot?
It's always hot. There's like always one week out of the year when it's kind of cool, but it's pretty much hot all year round.
That could be interesting, though, to try to find a fabric that's breathable, that also allows the structure to hold that kind of dramatic, classic elements that you like. It's good. That's a really cool idea. So what's your advice to people who are going through this process? What really helped you move the needle?
Yeah. So first of all, I always recommend online resources, right? Your videos, they have been very instrumental into my personal style journey. Also, Ellie Jean Royden's videos. But I think that what helped me the most is Facebook groups, right?
Yeah.
Because I get a lot of feedback from very experienced members.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it's very hard to see myself objectively. So the more time goes, the better I become at seeing these things with my subjective lens. So the other is also paper doll exercises, because that is when it first clicked for me. When you can kind of see yourself without having to invest the money into trying different stuff, for all the 63 essence blends, essentially, at least the 3 essence blends. Making sure that you're keeping notes of your style journey to see what has worked, what hasn't, because eventually you might end up going back to something you explored previously, right?
Yeah. So with a new lens.
Yeah, exactly. And I really strongly recommend the style pillars as well. I'm kind of working on it, so I can eventually get to my statement for my style as well. Yeah. I've been playing around with a few things. And also just a concept of a style toolbox, so I can keep everything organized and decide, okay, I want to pull this aspect from this tool and this aspect from this other tool. So those have very helpful things along my journey.
Celebrity examples, helpful or hurtful in your experience? For color or essences or any of it?
Yes. For color, they weren't very helpful for me. Just as, there's the act of the camera taking the picture. It doesn't represent the color as accurate. For essences, it was a bit more helpful. The person that I compared myself to try to get to dramatic, natural, classic was Lena Headey, I believe. Lena Headey.
Yeah.
I could see some similarity, but still not very much, probably because there is an ingenue aspect in my face.
That queen aspect.
She does. Yeah, she does.
For sure.
Yeah. So I think that it can help moderately, but still I wouldn't rely on it too much, because we all look so different. We all have our own balance of essences. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a personal thing too, because sometimes you can see it and other times you're like, there's just too much information that's missing to compare it accurately.
Right.
How do you find inspirations for your?
Yes, so definitely Pinterest. And one exercise that I did that really helped me was the fantasy style exercise, right? Because of course, there's things that ideally work for my body, face, etc. But there's also that aspect of what I wished I could do. So I kind of use that to guide my browsing on Pinterest a little bit. At least to have that more artistic or creative side represented too.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very creative. You really are able to take information and you don't need a ton of inspiration to just go on this is the vision. Would you say that the vision of your style is clear in your head and kind of just about bringing it out into the world?
Yes. I now have a mostly clear picture. Still a few things that I want to hammer out, but otherwise, I feel like I'm in a very good direction and slowly getting out of the messy middle.
So how do you think that this style journey has just changed your life on a day-to-day basis?
So the first thing is my confidence, right? I wouldn't say that I lacked confidence necessarily, but I've definitely seen a boost. And it's also nice having people compliment me saying, this looks really good on you. You look really confident in this. So that it just boosts the confidence even further, right? So that is one thing. The other thing is being able to get up in the morning and not having to worry about, oh my God, what am I going to wear today? And then just ending up wearing the same thing as always, right?
Yeah.
And also, I think it's a good outlet for creative expression. So it's just...
Do you feel like the compliments you've gotten now that you have these things figured out changed?
Yes. Yeah, they have. So now I feel like they're a little bit more specific. Things like, you look really tall in one. This color looks really good.
Or I never noticed that about you before. Or you look like there's new revelations people around seeing for the first time. So you feel kind of more seen?
Absolutely. I do. Because, again, the uniform I had before, leggings, t-shirt, and jacket, it wasn't a way to hide myself, right? Because I didn't feel super confident in my style. So I just wore whatever kind of blend in and just.
There's a phrase that when I was doing the analysis, my teacher mentioned, she was saying that it kind of switches over. I'm like, oh, that's a nice dress. So how did that girl know to do all those things? Like, or how did that person know how to just put all those things together? It's kind of like being mesmerized by the final result. Like, wow, I don't know how to do that. And it sounds like you're really hitting all those elements. It's so interesting too, because it seems like you had such good instincts and you had circled around all the things you needed. And these like analyses and reflections just really helped you put the final stand at like, yes, this is it.
Exactly. And I also do want to point out that I truly do believe that most of us have a good instinct when we're younger for this type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because like when I look back at things that I used to wear, they always emphasize my vertical. And so it's when I really got into my head trying to look like other people, like whatever was fashionable, I kind of got right.
Yeah.
Even the colors I would wear, they were always cool, kind of dark. So on some level, I feel like we all know.
Yeah.
But we kind of get lost along the way.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I look at some of my little kid photos. Like, I was definitely IRG as a like, you ask, how could a child do? I loved it all. I loved like Hardy Girls, like musical drama, like corsets and frills. So like, I must have been on to something there. So instincts, great. I really think that people will resonate with your story because, you know, you have such good instincts, but still kind of needed to progress through these different elements, test them out, feel them out. And then this kind of like rebirth happens where you're like, all the puzzle pieces are starting to happen. And I think a lot of people can be inspired by that because, you know, we're all trying to test different things. And sometimes, am I on the right track?
Right.
Would you have any advice to someone who is in that messy middle and of how to keep the confidence up to kind of the place you're at where you're like, all right.
Yeah. The first advice is to just approach it. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Just have fun with it. Because in the end, it is a form of self-expression, right? You want to be able to still enjoy it. Don't be too rigid. Be open still, which of course, easier said than done. But yeah, just have fun, you know, enjoy the process because yes, it's really nice to get to the destination eventually, which I don't believe I have arrived at the destination. But if you're able to enjoy the process, you know, you'll have so much more fun.
That destination always moves, you know, you figure something out and, you know, 6 months later, you're like, oh, we're pushing this finish line further back now.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. Maybe there is no destination.
Usually.
It's about the journey, you know?
Yeah. That's
and
amazing.
The other thing I would suggest is if you start feeling overwhelmed, you know, you don't have to always be at it. I've taken several breaks over the past year and a half, you know, because sometimes life gets in the way. You're too busy. Maybe you're overwhelmed, you know, it's okay. It's a journey. It doesn't have to be done in 1 year or, you know, whatever.
I think that is excellent advice. And I think when you look at it from a perspective of you were on your journey for a year, you know, and let's say the first year of your journey, it was, you know, kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying things, listening to yourself. It sounds like you really listened to yourself and you were like, something's not right with this dark autumn. Something's with this essence that you were okay waiting for the compound growth. You know, it was okay that this wasn't working because eventually you would find that perfect blend, find that perfect iteration. I think people will just be really inspired by your journey and just you've found out about yourself and how you're showing up in the world. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey. It's been a delight to have you.
It's been an honor. I really appreciate you having me over.
Okay. Until next time, guys.